everyone, I'm Sister Knits and Pearls of the Kentucky Fried Sisters, and today we're going to read some stories. First off, we're going to read Sewing the Rainbow, the story of the Gilbert Baker and the Rainbow Flag by Gail E. Pittman and illustrated by Holly Clifton Brown. Are you ready? Great! In a small town in Kansas, where everything was gray and dull and flat, there was a little boy who was full of color and sparkle and glitter. His name was Gilbert. Look, there's Gilbert. Gilbert loved visiting his grandmother's clothing store. He'd sit next to her while she'd sew and draw beautiful gowns and costumes. Gilbert dreamed of someday bringing these drawings to life. Look at all those beautiful dresses, and there he is with his grandmother sewing. But one day, his father took away his art supplies and tore up his drawings. There they are, going away. How sad. Surrounded by building blocks and erector sets, sports gear and slingshots, Gilbert's colorful, sparkly, glittery personality started to fade, and he too became gray and dull and flat like the Kansas landscape. Have you ever been to Kansas? I haven't. That doesn't sound very nice, but hopefully Kansas is a nice place. When I grow up, he dreamed, I'll go somewhere that's filled with color. But that didn't happen. Instead, when Gilbert turned 18, he received a letter that knocked every last bit of sparkle out of him. Oh no. Gilbert hated his dull, flat uniform. He refused to shoot a gun they gave him. I won't do it, he said. I'm not going to carry a gun. They made him do push-ups. They called him ugly names. But Gilbert wouldn't budge. The idea of shooting a gun made him feel sick. Yeah. And over here, so they sent him to San Francisco, where he'd never have to pick up a gun again. Look at all that color. Look how happy Gilbert is. The day Gilbert arrived in San Francisco, he saw magic. Instead of the dull, gray, flat landscape of Kansas, there were rolling green hills, the shimmering blue bay, and a cool white fog wafting over the Golden Gate Bridge. Gilbert was home. Finally, he could breathe. He could be his colorful, sparkly, glittery self. And there he is in San Francisco. Would you like to go to San Francisco someday? I would. He thought about his grandmother's clothing store. He thought about the drawings his father tore up. He realized he wanted all of it back. Look at those beautiful dresses. So Gilbert taught himself to sew, and he created fabulous costumes, just like the ones he drew when he was a little boy. There he is working. Word got around fast. He sewed regalia for Mama Jose and her imperial court. He sewed costumes for famous singers like Sylvester. He sewed banners for protests, marches, and rallies. Gilbert's creations were everywhere. He was making the city more and more colorful by the day. Look at all those beautiful signs and costumes, and that singer too. There's just one thing that continued to blemish the city. It was this symbol that in Gilbert's community was a constant reminder of evil. We need a new logo, his friend Harvey said to him one day, and Gilbert had an idea. See, there's a little flag. I wonder what his idea is. He bought huge bolts of cotton fabric, buckets of dye, and a lot of thread. He gathered up all his friends and got to work. They cut the fabric into long strips, dyed them in big trash cans, and then headed to the local laundromat to rinse the dye strips. They ironed the creases so the fabric was nice and smooth. Then Gilbert began to sew. They worked until dawn. It's a lot of work. By the time the sun rose, Gilbert and his friends had created 2 beautiful rainbow flags. But their work wasn't over. A flag belongs in the wind, Gilbert said. The big day arrived. A crowd gathered around City Hall. Gilbert held his breath. Would people understand the flags? Up they went, the flags unfurled, flooding the sky with a spectrum of color. The city radiated with color and glitter and sparkle. The crowd lit up like gold at the end of the rainbow. Today, the rainbow flag is everywhere, even in the small town in Kansas where Gilbert grew up. Wherever you see the rainbow flag, you'll know that it's okay to be your colorful, glittery, sparkly self. And then we have some very lovely reader's notes. Isn't that a nice story? Sewing the rainbow. Next, we're going to read Sparkle Boy. Sparkle Boy is written by Leslie Newman and illustrated by Maria Mola. Jessie adored all things shimmery, glittery, and sparkly. Look at my shimmery skirt, Jessie said to her little brother Casey as she twirled into the living room and her skirt twirled out around her. Casey looked up from his alphabet blocks. Ooh, shimmery, shimmery, he said, reaching out his hand. I want shimmery. Jessie stopped twirling and her skirt stopped twirling too. You can't have shimmery, said Casey. Why? Casey asked. Because boys don't wear shimmery skirts, said Jessie. Right, Mama? Mama thought about it for a minute. If Casey wants to wear a skirt, Casey can wear a skirt, she said. I don't have a problem with it. Mama went upstairs and came back down with a skirt that was now too small for Jessie. Here, buddy, she said to Casey. Try this on. Ooh, shimmery, shimmery, look! Casey said as he twirled around and his shimmery skirt twirled around him. Casey twirled and twirled until he got dizzy and plopped down on his bottom. Casey laughed. Jessie frowned. The next afternoon, Jessie went to a birthday party. When she came home, she raced into the kitchen. Look at my glittery nails, Jessie said, fanning out her fingers. Her nails glittered in the light. Casey looked up from his animal puzzle. Ooh, glittery, glittery, he said, pulling Jessie's hands towards him. I want glittery. Jessie snatched her hands away. You can't have glittery nails, Jessie said. Why? Casey asked. Because boys don't wear glittery nail polish, said Jessie. Right, Daddy? Daddy thought about it for a minute. Most boys don't wear nail polish, he said, but Casey can if he wants to. There's no harm in that. Daddy went upstairs and came back down with a bottle of glittery nail polish. Can't you just paint your toenails, Jessie asked, and then make him put socks on? That's not a bad idea, Daddy said to Casey. What do you say, pal? No, Casey shouted. He held out his hands and kept them perfectly still while Daddy painted his fingernails. Ooh, glittery, glittery, Casey said as he spread out his fingers wide so his nails glittered in the light. Jessie shook her head. The next morning, Jessie and Casey's grandmother came to visit. Abuelita, I like your sparkly bracelets, Jessie said. You can have one. I have plenty, said Abuelita. She took off a bracelet and slid it onto Jessie's wrist. Jessie swiveled her arm back and forth and watched the bracelet sparkle. Casey looked up from his dump truck. Ooh, sparkly, sparkly, Casey said. I want sparkly. Jessie hid her arm behind her back. You can't have a sparkly bracelet, Casey, she said. Why? Casey asked. Because boys don't wear sparkly bracelets, said Jessie. Right, Abuelita? Abuelita thought about it for a minute. I've never seen a boy wear a sparkly bracelet, she said. Until now. Abuelita turned to Casey. Here, Sparkle Boy, she said. She took off another bracelet and slid it onto Casey's arm. There's no reason why Casey can't wear a bracelet, Jessie. He isn't hurting anyone. Ooh, sparkly, sparkly, Casey said as he swiveled his arm back and forth and watched his bracelet sparkle. Jessie stomped her foot and ran into the house. On Saturday, Daddy went to the grocery store and Mama took Jessie and Casey to the library. I like the library. You should too. It's a nice place. Side note. Jessie came downstairs wearing her shimmery skirt, sparkly bracelet, and her nails glittered in the light. Soon Mama came downstairs with Casey. He wore his shimmery skirt, his sparkly bracelet, and his nails also glittered in the light. Mama, Jessie cried as she thrust her fist into her hips, why is Casey dressed like that? Because that's how Casey wants to dress, Mama said. That's not how boys are supposed to dress, said Jessie. Casey looks silly. I don't think Casey looks silly, Mama said, smiling at him. I think Casey looks like Casey. When Jessie, Casey, and Mama got to the library, story time had already begun, so they sat in the back and listened. After the librarian finished reading, Mama went to the front desk to check out some books. Jessie and Casey waited for her in the children's room. I like your skirt, a girl said to Jessie, and I like your sister's skirt. Jessie didn't say anything. I'm not a sister, Casey said. I'm a brother. You can't be a brother, said the girl. Why? Asked Casey. Because you're a girl, she said. I'm a boy, said Casey. You are? An older boy said. He stared at Casey and then laughed. Hey, look, he called to his friend. A boy in a skirt. The boy's friend laughed too. Then he knelt in front of Casey. Dude, he said, you can't go around wearing a skirt. Why? Casey asked. Because you look weird and everyone will laugh at you, said the boy. Why? Casey asked again. Because boys don't wear skirts and bracelets and nail polish. Everybody knows that, said the boy. Right? He asked, turning to Jessie. Jessie looked at Casey. Her face was scrunching up like it always did right before he started to cry. Why can't boys wear skirts and bracelets and nail polish? Jessie asked the boys. Because, one of the boys said, that's just the way it is. Not anymore, said Jessie as she put her arm around Casey's shoulder. Come on, little guy, she said. Let's go find Mama and go home. Jessie and Casey adored all things shimmery, glittery, and sparkly. Especially each other. The end. I have one last story for you all. It's called She Persisted. It's written by Chelsea Clinton and illustrated by Alexandra Boisier. Sometimes being a girl isn't easy. At some point, someone will probably tell you no. Will tell you to be quiet and may even tell you your dreams are impossible. Don't listen to them. These 13 American women certainly did not take no for an answer. They persisted. Harriet Tubman was born a slave. Her story could have ended there. Instead, she persisted, escaping from slavery, becoming the most famous conductor on the Underground Railroad. She risked her life many times to lead countless slaves to freedom, including her family, friends, and strangers. Every person she led to freedom arrived safely. I should fight for my liberty as long as my strength lasted. Once Helen Keller became blind and deaf as a toddler, few people thought she'd be able to learn to read, write, or speak. But she persisted. Helen learned how to do all three and not only became the first person with deaf blindness to graduate from college, but she used her story to help fight for more opportunities for people with disabilities in the United States and around the world. One can never consent to creep when one feels an impulse to soar. After her family fled poverty and the threat of violence in Ukraine for a new home in New York City, Clara Lemlich got a job working in a garment factory. She wrote that the factory conditions made women into machines, and so she persisted, organizing picket lines and strikes that ultimately helped win better pay, shorter hours, and safer working conditions for thousands of workers, both women and men. I am one of those who suffer from the abuses described here, and I move that we go on a general strike. Nellie Bly became a reporter in part because a male writer had said that working women are a monstrosity. And she wanted to prove that women could do anything. She persisted, and she put her safety at risk throughout her career in exposing real monstrosities, pretending to be a sweatshop worker and a patient in a mental hospital to show how badly people were being treated. I have never written a word that did not come from my heart. I never shall. Inspired from an early age by her brother's childhood illness, Virginia Apgar was determined to be a doctor, long before many girls had such dreams. Even though she was qualified to be a surgeon, the male head surgeon in her hospital discouraged her because she was a woman. Nevertheless, she persisted, becoming an anesthesiologist and creating the Apgar score to test a newborn baby's health, which hospitals all over the world still use today. Nobody, but nobody, is going to stop breathing on me. After Maria Tallchief's family moved to California, partly to support Maria's dreams of becoming a dancer, she was teased by students in school for her Native American heritage, and later was encouraged to change her last name to something that sounded Russian, since many professional dancers at the time were from Russia. She persisted, ignoring all of the taunting and poor advice, to become the first great American prima ballerina. It never occurred to me to say, it hurts to do that. As a 15-year-old riding the bus home from school in Montgomery, Alabama, Claudette Colvin was expected to give up her seat to a white woman just because she was African American. In her refusal to get up, she persisted in taking a stand for what's right, helping to inspire Rosa Parks to make the same choice 9 months later, an act many point to as the start of the modern civil rights movement. I knew then, and I know now, that when it comes to justice, there is no easy way to get it. You can't sugarcoat it. You have to take a stand and say, that's not right. I'm sorry, I cry every time I read this book, but it's one of my favorites. When Ruby Bridges was in kindergarten, many schools across America, particularly in the South, still refused African American students their equal rights to an education. Ruby wouldn't be treated like a second-class student, and she persisted, walking for weeks past angry, hateful protesters to integrate an all-white elementary school in New Orleans. That fateful walk to school began a journey, and we must work together to continue moving forward. As the first woman to serve as both U.S. Representative and a U.S. Senator, Margaret Chase Smith could have let that fact alone be her legacy. Instead, she persisted in championing women's rights and more opportunities for women in the military, standing up for free speech and supporting space exploration. The head of NASA once noted that we wouldn't have put a man on the moon without Margaret. The right way is not always the popular and easy way. Standing for right when it's unpopular is a true test of moral character. Sally Ride always believed women could succeed in math and in a math or science career. Although not everyone agreed, she persisted and she became the first American woman in space. But that wasn't enough for Sally. She traveled into space once more and then created space and science and engineering programs, especially for girls, so she could help generations of young women achieve their dreams too, both on Earth and in outer space. Young girls need to see role models in whatever career they may choose, just so they can picture themselves doing those jobs someday. You can't be what you can't see. When, as a kid, Florence Griffith Joyner visited her father in the Mojave Desert, he would urge her to run faster and faster, to run as fast as a jackrabbit. Even when she had to leave college to help support her family, she persisted in training on the track, then went back to school and got faster and faster. Her unbroken world records in the 100-meter and 200-meter sprint set at the 1988 Summer Olympics mean she's the fastest woman ever. When anyone tells me I can't do anything, I'm just not listening anymore. Oprah Winfrey's grandmother expected Oprah to follow in her footsteps and become a maid. Oprah knew, even as a little girl, that her dreams would take her somewhere else. She persisted in turning her dreams into reality and became a media superstar, working in movies, books, magazines, theater, and most of all, television, where The Oprah Winfrey Show remains the highest-rated talk show of all time. The biggest adventure you can ever take is to live the life of your dreams. Watching fictional judges on television inspired Sonia Sotomayor to want to be a real-life judge when she grew up. She knew she'd have to speak English as well as she spoke Spanish, study hard in school, and manage her diabetes before she could one day wear judge's robes and have a gavel in her hand. She persisted, eventually becoming a Supreme Court justice and the first ever Latina to sit on America's highest court. I have never had to face anything that could overwhelm the native optimism and stubborn perseverance I was blessed with. So, if anyone ever tells you no, if anyone ever says your voice isn't important or your dreams are too big, remember these women. They persisted, and you should too.
Welcome to Capital Pride 2020. Sister Frieda Goodhome from the Kentucky Pride Sisters and from Read with Pride, which is what I'm here to talk to you about right now. Read with Pride is a nonprofit organization that strives to raise readership and awareness of LGBTQ plus authors and our stories here in Appalachia. We accomplish this by selling LGBTQ plus books at local and regional events year-round. Now, in the absence of those events, you can purchase books from Read with Pride at Girls Burritos in Lexington, Kentucky. I say that with thanks and say it with love. Thank you for offering us a physical space to share the stories of our people. And they're cheap. God, they're so cheap. It was just the whole point. We want people to be able to read our stories. Well, Read with Pride is funded by charitable donations and the sale of our books. All monetary donations are used in turn to buy books. If we receive a larger donation of $50 or more, we then reach out to a local nonprofit and donate X number of books. It just depends on what the donation is. We let the nonprofits choose the books from our inventory. We deliver them free of charge. Currently, we have sent large book donations to Greenhouse 17, Arbor Youth Services, both in Lexington, Kentucky. If you would like to donate books and you live or work in the Central Kentucky region, then you can contact us at readingwithpride@gmail.com. And we'll discuss the arrangements of how to exchange those books. If you donate books written by LGBTQ plus people or about LGBTQ plus people, then we'll sell those at our pop-up, one of the pop-ups once the pandemic is over. And they'll be available for purchase at Girls Burritos in the meantime. Now, we do exclusively sell queer authors and stories about LGBTQ stories. We will accept any book donation. Books that don't meet our mission statement criteria are used in one of two ways. If the books are in good condition, they'll be sold back to used bookstores, and then that money in turn will be used to buy books that do meet our mission and that we can continue to share with the community. If they are not sellable, we will donate them. We'll donate them to Greenhouse 17, again, Arbor Youth Services, or the Lexington Habitat for Humanity Restore. The short version of that is your book donation can help. If not Read with Pride, then some other Kentucky-based nonprofit. Read queer books. Read gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual, queer questioning, intersex stories. Go see the plays. Celebrate our characters being on TV. We all have stories to share, and once you start to read or hear the stories of others, you realize that your story isn't much, or it is different. All of our stories are unique, but there's a certain overlap that helps build that sense of community that we experience at things like Pride. And you learn you're not alone. You either learn from our histories that we've all been fighting the same fight, or we learn that we've been sharing the same dreams all along. Or fantasies.
Hello, this is Dorian Electra, and this message goes out to everyone in Frankfort, Kentucky, the LGBTQ plus community. I'm sending you my love with this beautiful virtual Pride. Hey, you know what? COVID's here, etc., but you know what? Pride is sticking around, my friend, alright? Sending my love and peace. Dorian Electra, signing out.
Hi everyone, it's me, Desmond is Amazing, and I am all wishing you a very happy Pride from New York City to Frankfort, Kentucky. I am so sorry that Pride got canceled because of COVID. NYC Pride got canceled due to COVID, so you're not alone. And just be yourself, and know that there's others out there just like you, and don't listen to the haters, and just be yourself and love yourself. Bye!
Hello, Frankfort friends. Chris Hartman here, Executive Director of the Fairness Campaign. I use he, him gender pronouns, and I'm excited to be chatting with you today. The organizers of Capitol Pride have asked if I would share a brief history of the Frankfort Fairness Movement. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. In December of 2012, at the invitation of Frankfort native John Carlton, myself, Michael Aldridge with the ACLU of Kentucky came to meet with him, a couple of other community members, and Mayor Bill May in December of 2012. And those discussions that we started having, could the city of Frankfort potentially pass an anti-discrimination law that would protect LGBTQ people from discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations. At the time when we started talking, there were only 3 cities in Kentucky with fairness ordinances: Louisville, Lexington, and Covington. Now, shortly thereafter, the tiny Appalachian town of Vico actually became the 4th city in Kentucky to pass fairness. But Frankfort, of course, became city number 5, but it was not without a struggle. And this is where the real story of the Frankfort Fairness Movement comes in. So after we had that initial discussion in December 2012, it seemed like there was a real possibility that Frankfort could become the next city with a fairness ordinance. And that is when the community really started coming together. We started having meetings. First there were a few people, but then shortly thereafter there were dozens of people that were coming to the community meetings, the strategy meetings, where folks were talking about how they wanted to go about presenting the case, the argument for a fairness ordinance at City Hall. And people who were part of the movement will remember there were so many bumps along the way, and the perseverance of the Frankfort fairness leaders is what will always stick with me. Folks will remember, if they were in the room on the first night that the City Commission heard the ordinance and was going to consider it, it failed. It failed, and the room full of supporters, there were probably 80 of us in the room, most folks left dejectedly, but Mayor May folks kept having the conversation, and 20 minutes later, after the City Commission had rejected the fairness ordinance, a commissioner decided to change their vote, and that opened up the door for the debate on the fairness ordinance to move forward. It lasted about 6 months of pretty intense debate at City Hall. Anybody who was there will remember, and folks, of course, cannot forget the massive outpouring of support that folks saw at the History Center, the History Museum, where there were 400 Frankfort folks out there to talk about fairness. The vast majority of them were in support, and ultimately that led to the 3-2 vote for a fairness ordinance in Frankfort, securing the capital city spot as the 5th city in Kentucky to pass that historic ordinance. Now there are 20 communities all across the Commonwealth that have followed Frankfort's lead. And of course, the work of Frankfort Fairness led into the formation of the Frankfort P.4 chapter, Parents and Friends of LGBTQ Folks, which has been in operation for years and has helped so many folks who are just coming out or are struggling to come out, or who have had folks in their families who have come out. And then, of course, the incredible Capitol Pride movement, which has just skyrocketed. The first Capitol Pride was big and marvelous. Hundreds of folks came out, but as anyone who's been to the more recent Capitol Prides, you know, it's growing exponentially every year. I'm so excited for that work to continue in Frankfort. I do hope that it rubs off on neighboring communities. 20 cities and counties in Kentucky with fairness ordinances still only covers about 1/3 of our Commonwealth. So there's a lot more work to be done. I hope the Frankfort Fairness Movement, Frankfort P.4, and Capitol Pride continues to inspire others and motivates neighboring communities to do the same. So I'm happy to chat with anyone if you'd like. Chris at fairness.org. Of course, you can always find us on Twitter at fairnesscamp, or fairness.org is the website. If you're in a community that doesn't have fairness yet, we'd love to help make it happen. Happy Pride.